The office of William Sterling was not so much a room as it was a declaration of war against humility. Located on the 70th floor of the Sterling Tower, a gleaming black spear of glass and steel that pierced the Los Angeles skyline, it was a space designed to intimidate. The floor was a seamless expanse of polished Italian marble, so black it seemed to drink the light. One entire wall was a floor-to-ceiling window offering a god's-eye view of the sprawling city below, a concrete jungle over which he reigned. The desk, a monstrous slab of rare Micasa ebony, was large enough to land a helicopter on, and behind it, enthroned in a chair of buttery soft, hand-stitched Italian leather, sat the king himself. "I'm sorry, sir, but there must be some mistake." William Sterling's voice, smooth and cold as the marble beneath his feet, echoed in the cavernous, minimalist space. "The interview is for a night janitor position, not for children." His blue eyes, the color of Arctic ice, scanned the boy standing before him. The boy was perhaps 15, thin but with a wiry strength, and he clutched a worn leather briefcase to his chest as if it were a shield. His clothes were clean but threadbare, his posture straight, his gaze direct. Kevin Johnson held the briefcase, tighter, his fingers trembling almost imperceptibly. It was not a tremor of fear, it was the vibration of a tightly coiled spring, a controlled indignation he had learned to master at a very early age. "Yes, sir, I know," he said, his voice steady, calm, and clear, a stark contrast to the opulence of the room. "My father, Jerome Johnson, was scheduled for the interview at 3 o'clock this afternoon. He's in the hospital, pneumonia, so I came in his place." William Sterling leaned back in his throne, a slow, condescending smile spreading across his handsome, patrician face. As the CEO of Sterling Corporation, one of the largest and most powerful industrial cleaning and maintenance conglomerates in the country, he was accustomed to the unusual, the desperate, the strange, but this was a new level of absurdity. "Kid," he said, the word dripping with a weary, dismissive amusement. "That's not how the real world works. This isn't a movie. You don't just take over your daddy's job interview, go home, tell your father to reschedule when he's feeling better." "Respectfully, sir," Kevin replied, his voice unwavering, his brown eyes locking onto the CEO's gaze with an intensity that was unsettling. "My father needs this job. Today we're 3 months behind on rent. He was laid off from the factory 2 months ago, right after he got sick." He took a small step forward, a quiet assertion of his presence in this alien environment. "I can do the job he would do. I can start tonight." Sterling let out a harsh, barking laugh. It was a sound devoid of any real humor, a pure expression of contempt. "You're 15 years old. You can't even legally work the night shift in this state. Besides," he paused, letting the unspoken prejudice hang in the air between them like a toxic, invisible cloud, "this kind of work, it requires a certain level of experience, a background that you simply don't have." It was in that moment that something shifted in Kevin Johnson's eyes. The flicker of desperation was gone, replaced by something else, something cold and hard and ancient. The boy who had been begging for a chance was gone. In his place stood a strategist who knew exactly what kind of game was being played, and who knew with absolute certainty that he held the winning hand. "You're right about one thing, Mr. Sterling," he said, his voice suddenly infused with a new, chilling confidence. He placed the worn briefcase on the edge of the massive ebony desk, the sound of the leather on the wood a soft, defiant punctuation mark in the silent room. He clicked it open and removed a single, crisp manila folder. From the folder he produced an envelope. "I'm not 15, he said calmly. "I'm 17, and here is a certified copy of my updated birth certificate." Sterling frowned, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features. He snatched the document from Kevin's hand. It was legitimate. A small, insignificant detail, but it was a crack in the foundation of his assumptions. "Even so," he began, "that doesn't change the fact that I'm black." Kevin finished the sentence the CEO didn't have the courage, or perhaps the self-awareness to complete. "You're right. That doesn't change. But what also doesn't change, Mr. Sterling, is that your state-of-the-art multi-million-dollar security system has a critical flaw, a blind spot in the east wing of this building, on the 42nd floor. That allows for completely undetected, unauthorized access between 10:15 and 11 p.m. every single night, right when the guards are making their sweep of the underground parking structure." The silence that followed was deafening. The only sound was the faint, whisper-quiet hum of the building's climate control system. Sterling felt the blood drain from his face, a cold, sickening sensation that started in his gut and spread through his limbs. How could you possibly know that?" "Research, Mr. Sterling," Kevin replied, his voice still infuriatingly calm. The same research that showed me that Sterling Corporation is currently the subject of a discreet but very serious investigation by the FBI's white-collar crime division for corruption related to federal maintenance contracts. The same research that led me to believe that you might be in the market for, let's call them, trusted employees to work the night shifts. Shifts where certain irregularities might need to go unnoticed. Kevin closed the folder with a soft, definitive click. A small, knowing smile touched his lips, a smile that did not reach his eyes. My father doesn't know anything about this, of course, he said. He's an honest man. He just wants an honest day's pay for an honest day's work, to support his family. He paused, letting the words hang in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. But I tend to pay attention to things that most people ignore. William Sterling, the titan of industry, the king in his ivory tower, looked at this boy who was clearly no ordinary boy, and realized with a jolt of pure, undiluted terror that he had completely, catastrophically misjudged the situation. He began to suspect, with a certainty that made his blood run cold, that Kevin Johnson knew far more about the dark, secret heart of the Sterling Corporation than any 17-year-old boy should. Sterling's hand, which had been resting casually on the arm of his chair, clenched into a fist. His knuckles turned white. The smooth, polished veneer of his corporate civility was cracking. "Listen here, kid," he snarled, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but it's going to stop right now. Security." He jabbed a button on the sleek black intercom on his desk with an excessive, violent force. Kevin remained motionless, that same disturbing, enigmatic smile still playing on his lips. "Before your security guards arrive, Mr. Sterling," he said, his voice as calm as a frozen lake, "you might want to know how I found out about the deal you made with Concrete Solutions." Sterling froze, his finger still on the intercom button. The name hit him like a physical blow. "The one," Kevin continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "where you overcharged the federal government by 40% for a municipal cleaning contract, and then split the profits with a shell company owned by your brother-in-law." The CEO felt the blood drain from his face. The Concrete Solutions deal was his masterpiece of corruption, a secret so deeply buried, so protected by layers of lawyers and confidential, encrypted documents, that he had believed it to be untouchable. "You don't know what you're talking about," he whispered, the words a dry rasp in his throat. "Last Thursday's meeting," Kevin recited, his memory apparently eidetic. 6 o'clock in the evening, conference room on the 22nd floor. You, your CFO, and 2 lawyers from the firm of Donahue, Spear, and Lyons. You said, and I quote, "As long as the key documents disappear before the federal audit next month, we can keep this scheme going for another 5 years. Kevin tilted his head, a gesture of almost clinical curiosity. "Shall I continue? Or would you prefer that I talk about the $500,000 in your offshore account in the Cayman Islands?" Sterling felt his legs go weak. He sank back into his Italian leather chair, which suddenly felt less like a throne and more like an electric chair. How could a 17-year-old kid from the wrong side of town know these things? Specific details from conversations that had taken place in soundproofed rooms, conversations he had believed to be utterly private. "That's impossible," he breathed. "No one else was present at that meeting." "You're right," Kevin confirmed calmly. No one else was in the room. But someone was in the ventilation duct, doing routine maintenance on the air conditioning system. He paused, letting the full weight of his next words land with the force of a battering ram. "My father, Jerome Johnson, he works for the small, independent cleaning and maintenance company you hired last month. The one you hired because they were cheaper than the big unionized corporations." The penny dropped. It landed not with a soft clink, but with the deafening clang of a prison door slamming shut. Sterling vaguely remembered authorizing the contract, a minor cost-saving measure. He had never even bothered to learn the name of the company. He had never imagined that in his arrogance, in his penny-pinching contempt for the people who cleaned his offices, he had hired his own spies. He had personally invited the Trojan horse into the gates of his kingdom. "My father is an honest man, Mr. Sterling," Kevin continued, his voice hardening slightly. "A good man. He cleans your offices. He fixes your systems. And he would never dream of questioning why you and your executives always seem to schedule your most important, most sensitive meetings on the very days when he is scheduled to be working alone in the building, after hours." Kevin stood up and crossed the room, assuming a relaxed posture that was a mockery of Sterling's own power pose. "But I," he said, turning to face the CEO, "am not my father." Sterling, his mind reeling, tried to grasp for some semblance of control. Even if that were true, he stammered. You have no proof. These are just words. Your word against mine. Kevin walked back to the desk. From his briefcase, he produced a small, sleek digital recorder. Recording from last Thursday, 6:14 p.m., he said, his voice as neutral as if he were reading a weather report. Crystal clear audio quality, courtesy of the high-sensitivity microphone I installed in the ventilation system 3 weeks ago, during a routine filter change. He pressed a button, and William Sterling's own voice, unmistakable and damning, echoed through the silent, opulent office, double quotes, ... As long as the documents disappear before the federal audit, we can keep this scheme going for another 5 years. The FBI won't find anything if there's nothing to find. Sterling felt the world collapse around him, the marble floor seeming to drop away into an infinite, black abyss. He stared at the small, black device on his desk as if it were a venomous snake. You, how dare you, he whispered. How dare I what? Document federal crimes. Kevin turned off the recorder. Actually, Mr. Sterling, I have 17 similar recordings from the last 2 months alone. Each one is a little more damning, a little more legally problematic than the last. The CEO finally, truly, understood. He had not just underestimated a desperate teenager looking for a job, he was facing something else entirely. This was not a random encounter. This was a meticulously planned, brilliantly executed intelligence operation. What do you want? He asked. The words of surrender, an admission of his own catastrophic defeat. Initially, Kevin said, standing up and walking to the panoramic window, his small, thin frame silhouetted against the vast, sprawling city below, I just wanted a job for my father, a chance for him to pay his rent, to buy his medicine, to live with a measure of dignity. He turned back to face the broken man in the leather chair. But your reactions today, your casual cruelty, your lazy, reflexive prejudice, they've shown me something very interesting, Mr. Sterling. You're not just corrupt, you're stupid. You're stupid enough to underestimate people based on the color of their skin. And that, he said, his voice dropping, opens up a whole new world of possibilities. Sterling attempted one last, pathetic act of bravado. You think you can blackmail me? I'm William Sterling. My family built this empire over 3 generations. And I'm Kevin Johnson, the boy replied, his voice suddenly infused with a power that Sterling had never heard before. The son of a janitor you wouldn't even deign to say hello to in the elevator. He walked back towards the desk, his movements now filled with a new, predatory grace. And that's the difference between us, Mr. Sterling. While you were inheriting your power, I was forced to develop my intelligence just to survive. The boy walked over to the floor-to-ceiling bookshelf, a monument to Sterling's unread intellectual pretensions. He ran his fingers over the spines of the expensive, leather-bound volumes. You know what I learned growing up on the outskirts of this city, Mr. Sterling? I learned that powerful men like you always make the same fatal mistake. You think that poverty is synonymous with stupidity. You think that because we clean your floors, we are simple. While you were sleeping in a silk-sheeted crib, I was studying in public libraries until they kicked me out at closing time. While you were inheriting your connections, I was building my knowledge, one borrowed book at a time. And while you were playing businessman with your daddy's money, he turned, his eyes burning with a righteous fire. I was learning to watch, to listen, and to document my enemy's every single move. Sterling swallowed hard, his throat dry. What do you really want? He whispered. Kevin smiled. But this time, there was something genuinely dangerous in that expression, something that promised a reckoning that went far beyond a simple case of blackmail. Now, Mr. Sterling, he said, sitting down in one of the expensive visitors' chairs opposite the desk, as an equal. Now we're asking the right question, because what I want, what I really want, goes far beyond a simple janitor's job. What I want, he leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Sterling's, is everything. The silence in William Sterling's 70th floor office was no longer the serene, powerful quiet of a king in his castle. It was the dead, airless silence of a tomb. The CEO, a man accustomed to dominating every room he entered, now looked small and fragile in his oversized Italian leather chair. The panoramic view of Los Angeles, once a symbol of his dominion, now seemed to mock him, a vast, indifferent world that was about to watch him fall. Kevin Johnson sat opposite him, no longer a supplicant but a predator who had successfully cornered his prey. The worn leather briefcase on his lap was Pandora's box, and Sterling knew, with a sickening certainty, that he had only just glimpsed the horrors it contained. Everything, Sterling repeated. The word, a horse. Incredulous whisper. What does that even mean? It means, Mr. Sterling, Kevin began, his voice calm and methodical. But the terms of our relationship are about to be renegotiated, drastically. He leaned back in his chair, assuming a posture of such casual authority that it was a profound insult. You see, for the last 3 months, while you've been busy running your corrupt little empire, I've been doing my homework. A lot of homework. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out not a recorder, but a sleek, thin tablet. He swiped the screen and turned it to face Sterling. Let's start with your personal life, shall we? A bit of leverage is always a good way to begin a negotiation. The screen displayed a series of photographs. Crisp and high resolution, they showed Sterling, unmistakable, leaving a high-end hotel in Santa Monica, his arm draped around a woman who was very clearly not his wife. The next photo showed them dining at a secluded table at a Michelin-starred restaurant. The next, a discreet shot of them entering a private beachfront property in Malibu. Rebecca Martinez, Kevin said, his voice devoid of any emotion, wife of State Senator Robert Martinez, a man whose vote on the recent environmental zoning regulations was, shall we say, very beneficial to Sterling Corporation's expansion plans, a man who also happens to sit on the Senate Ethics Committee. Sterling felt his blood run cold. His affair with Rebecca was a secret he had guarded with paranoid ferocity. It was his greatest vulnerability, a personal and professional time bomb. He stammered. Your biggest mistake, Mr. Sterling, is your predictability, Kevin explained. Every Thursday, at 9 p.m., you meet at room 312 of the Grandview Hotel. You pay in cash. You think you're being discreet. He swiped to another screen, this one showing a series of financial transactions. This is the transfer of $500,000 from one of your offshore shell companies to an account in Ms. Martinez's name, probably hush money, or perhaps payment for services rendered. The political kind, I mean. He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. And this, he swiped again, is the recording of the phone conversation where you promise her husband a $2 million consulting contract with one of your subsidiaries in exchange for his vote on the environmental bill. A classic kickback scheme, highly illegal, highly prosecutable. That's extortion, Sterling hissed, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and terror. No, Mr. Sterling, Kevin corrected him gently. This is documentation. Extortion would be if I were asking you for money. But as I said, money is the last thing I want from you. The intercom on Sterling's desk buzzed, a harsh, intrusive sound. In the tense silence, his secretary's voice, tight with panic, crackled through the speaker. Mr. Sterling, there's a lawyer here. He says he has an appointment with you. A Dr. Michael Thompson, from Thompson and Associates. Sterling frowned, his mind reeling. I didn't schedule any meeting with Michael Thompson. Actually, Kevin said, a small, triumphant smile playing on his lips. I did. The office door swung open, and a man in his late 40s entered. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his leather briefcase polished to a high shine, his demeanor a perfect blend of confidence and quiet authority. William Sterling recognized him immediately. Dr. Michael Thompson was a legend in the city, one of the most respected and feared corporate lawyers in the country. He specialized in civil rights, corporate corruption, and bringing powerful, arrogant men like William Sterling to their knees. Good afternoon, Mr. Sterling. Dr. Thompson greeted him, his smile professional but carrying a hint of steel. He walked over and sat down next to Kevin. Kevin has been telling me about your interesting conversation. Sterling looked back and forth between the 17-year-old boy and the high-powered lawyer, his mind struggling to connect the dots. You knew to know each other. Kevin is my nephew, Dr. Thompson replied calmly. And for the past 3 months he has been my most efficient, most effective, and most underestimated unofficial investigator. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place, and the full, horrifying scope of the situation finally became clear to Sterling. He had not just been outsmarted by a clever teenager, he had been the target of a sophisticated, professional, and utterly devastating legal operation. You see, Mr. Sterling, Dr. Thompson continued, opening his own briefcase and laying out a series of documents with methodical precision. My office has been receiving anonymous complaints about the irregular business practices at Sterling Corporation for years, unfair labor practices, discriminatory hiring, potential fraud, but we never had enough concrete evidence to build a formal case, until my father got the cleaning and maintenance contract here, Kevin added, picking up the narrative seamlessly. Kevin, knowing the situation, suggested a rather creative approach to gathering evidence. the lawyer explained. All of it, I assure you, completely within the bounds of the law. After all, conversations that take place in a workplace, in the presence of authorized employees, are not, technically speaking, private. Sterling stared at them, his face a mask of disbelief. You can't use that in court, he whispered. It was obtained illegally. Dr. Thompson laughed, a low rumbling sound of pure intellectual amusement. Mr. Sterling, my nephew is a minor. He was working with his father in an environment where he was legally authorized to be. Every recording, every piece of evidence, was obtained in the course of his legitimate, contracted duties. There is nothing illegal about it. Unethical, on your part, absolutely. Criminal, even. But on our part, it's just brilliant investigative work. Kevin leaned forward, his eyes burning with an intensity that seemed to peel back the layers of Sterling's soul. You know what your biggest mistake was, Mr. Sterling? It wasn't the corruption. It wasn't the affairs. It was your assumption that, because my father is a janitor, we must be simple. You never did your research. You never asked a single question about our family. If you had, you would have discovered that my uncle has a law degree from Harvard. You would have discovered that my cousin is a senior agent in the FBI's white-collar crime division, and you would have discovered, he paused for effect, that I, myself, have already been accepted to 3 Ivy League universities, all with full academic scholarships. Sterling's carefully constructed world of arrogance and privilege finally, irrevocably shattered. What do you want? He asked again, his voice now the broken, pleading whisper of a defeated man. Dr. Thompson slid a thick document across the desk. First, he said, a full written and signed confession of your various corruption schemes, including the Concrete Solutions deal and the kickback scheme involving Senator Martinez. Second, the immediate and full restitution of all funds embezzled from federal contracts. Third, your full and unconditional cooperation with the federal authorities who are, as we speak, preparing a series of indictments based on the information we have provided them. And in exchange, Kevin added, his voice cold as ice, we will consider not turning over the evidence of your various extramarital affairs to your wife, and the evidence of your political bribery to the Senate Ethics Committee. We find that the threat of personal ruin is often a more powerful motivator than the threat of prison. Sterling, in a last, desperate gambit, tried to bluff. No one will believe you. It's my word against yours. Kevin and Dr. Thompson exchanged a look of almost pitying amusement. Mr. Sterling, the lawyer said, his voice gentle, you still don't understand the situation. We don't need anyone's word. Kevin picked up his tablet and connected it to the large monitor on Sterling's office wall. Because in addition to all the audio recordings, he said, we have something even better. The screen lit up, showing a series of high-definition video feeds. Crystal clear images from security cameras Sterling didn't even know existed. Conversations in conference rooms, secret meetings in his own office, the exchange of cash-filled envelopes in the parking garage. All of it, documented in stunning, undeniable detail. As part of our maintenance contract, Kevin explained, a small, triumphant smile on his face. We installed an upgraded security system throughout the building. Small, advanced wireless cameras, so small, in fact, that not even your own head of security knew they were there. William Sterling sank back into his chair, a broken man. He was not just facing a desperate teenager, he was facing a professional intelligence operation that had used his own arrogance, his own prejudice, as a weapon against him. That his phone rang. He looked at the screen. The caller ID read, FBI Agent Crawford. His hand shook as he answered. Mr. Sterling, a brisk, no-nonsense voice said on the other end. This is Agent Crawford with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I need you to remain in your office. We are on our way up with warrants for your arrest, and for the search and seizure of all relevant documents. Sterling dropped the phone. It clattered onto the ebony desk, the sound echoing in the silent room. Kevin walked over to him, crouching down so that he was at eye level with the devastated CEO. You know what impresses me the most, Mr. Sterling, he said, his voice a low, intense whisper throughout this entire conversation, a conversation about the complete and utter destruction of everything you've ever built. You haven't once asked about my father. You haven't asked if he's getting better. You haven't asked if he needs medical attention, if he can afford his hospital bills. Even now, facing your own ruin, all you can think about is yourself. Dr. Thompson methodically gathered his documents, placing them back in his briefcase. The recordings and video evidence have been delivered simultaneously to the FBI, the IRS, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and the New York Times, he said, glancing at his watch. In approximately 15 minutes, the first report will be published online. Your public life, Mr. Sterling, is officially over. Sterling looked out the massive window. He could see the flashing lights of police cars and the unmistakable silhouettes of news vans already positioning themselves in the street below. He had built his empire high above the city, insulated from the lives of ordinary people. Now, that city was coming for him. "You've destroyed my life," he whispered. Kevin stood up, his small frame seeming to radiate an immense, unshakable dignity. "No, Mr. Sterling," he said. "We merely documented how you destroyed your own life, with your own criminal choices and your own blind prejudice. The difference," added Dr. Thompson, pausing at the door, "is that when you destroyed lives, it was for greed and for sport. When we act, it is for justice." As the sound of sirens grew louder, heralding the end of decades of impunity, William Sterling sat alone in his marble and glass office. The corrupt empire he believed to be untouchable crumbling around him like a house of cards. Every word of contempt he had directed at the janitor's son now echoed in his mind, a testament to the colossal, fatal stupidity of a man who was about to learn, the hard way, that in the real world, it is not wealth or power that makes a man, it is character, and his, he now realized, was utterly, irredeemably bankrupt. 6 months later, Kevin Johnson sat in the front row of Harvard Law School's majestic main auditorium, listening as the dean announced the recipient of the prestigious John W. Davis Scholarship, a full-ride award given to the most promising first-year student with a demonstrated commitment to social justice. The boy Sterling had considered unfit to clean his floors was now officially recognized as one of the most brilliant and promising young legal minds in the country. The ceremony was live-streamed, and among the thousands of viewers watching online was William Sterling, watching on a contraband smartphone from the common room of a medium-security federal prison. He had been sentenced to 15 years for corruption, money laundering, and racketeering. He had lost everything. Jerome Johnson, fully recovered from his pneumonia, now supervised the entire maintenance and facilities staff at Harvard University. In a delicious twist of irony, the man Sterling had considered too lowly to even acknowledge was now responsible for the upkeep of one of the most prestigious and powerful institutions in the world. "Dad," Kevin said into his phone after the ceremony, the sounds of celebration echoing around him. "Thank you. Thank you for teaching me that honest work is never something to be ashamed of." "And thank you, son," Jerome replied, his voice thick with emotion, "for teaching me that intelligence has no color, no social class, and no limitations, except for the ones we accept from those who fear our true greatness." Dr. Michael Thompson had become a national figure, a leading voice in the fight against corporate corruption and discrimination. His victory against Sterling Corporation had set a series of legal precedents that were now being used to protect thousands of workers across the country. The Sterling Corporation itself was a ghost. It had been dismantled and sold off in a judicial auction. Its assets were acquired, ironically, by a consortium of small minority-owned businesses who transformed the company's culture from one of toxic exclusion to a model of inclusion and ethical business practices. 3 years passed. Kevin, now in his final year at Harvard, was interning at his uncle's law firm, already making a name for himself as a formidable legal mind who had never lost a racial discrimination case. Sterling, meanwhile, had aged 20 years in prison. His powerful friends had long since abandoned him. His former employees had all testified against him in exchange for immunity. The man who had once believed that money and skin color were the ultimate measures of a person's worth now depended on the charity of his cellmates for an extra bar of soap. One cold winter afternoon, Kevin visited the federal prison. He went, not out of a desire for revenge, but out of a sense of finality, of closing a chapter. He came to personally deliver a copy of his graduation thesis, a brilliant legal analysis titled Systemic Prejudice as a Catalyst for Corporate Implosion, a case study of the Sterling Corporation. Sterling, in his faded orange jumpsuit, looked at the young man he had so casually, so cruelly dismissed. "Why?" was all he could manage to ask. Kevin looked at him, not with hatred, but with a kind of profound, analytical pity. "Because you taught me the most valuable lesson of my life," he said. "You taught me that ignorance, when it masquerades as superiority, is the most dangerous and self-destructive weakness a person can have. My father raised me to believe that hard work, education, and character are what make a man. You tried to convince me that inheritance, skin color, and a large bank account were all that mattered. Thank you," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "for proving, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that my father was right." Sterling hung his head, the full, crushing weight of his downfall finally settling upon him. He hadn't just lost his money or his status. He had lost the opportunity to know extraordinary people, because he had chosen, at every turn, to see only stereotypes. Kevin left the prison and drove to the hospital where his father was now a board member, advising on labor relations. Father and son embraced in the same hallway where, 3 years earlier, a boy had decided that the world's prejudices would not define his future. You know what his biggest mistake was? Cohen asked his father as they looked out at the city. What was that, son? He confused privilege with intelligence. Kevin replied. He confused money with value. And he confused skin color with competence. When you make those 3 mistakes all at the same time, it doesn't matter how much power you think you have. You've already lost the game.